Ladies and gentlemen, I have tried to bring it all together in this particular presentation so that we can have a deeper picture into what awaits us if we don't act. We've heard a lot of speakers speak this afternoon about the need for action, the need to create a link between the leadership and the people. Now, in this presentation, there are consequences if we don't act. What are the consequences? I've listed the presentation into 6 specific areas. 1, ask a question. Is Nigeria dying? A lot of people talk about Nigeria being a failed state. We're going to go into a little in-depth into that particular question, and your guess is as good as mine what we shall come out with at the end of the day. But it is up to you to decide. What I will be doing is posing questions. Then we'll look at this national economic structure and the dependence on oil. Whether that dependence on oil is a sustainable strategy if we actually want to take Nigeria to the promised land. And then there's a third one which I call leaking Nigeria. I will talk about what do I mean by leaking Nigeria. Nigeria, in my opinion, is leaking. And I will give you a little insight into what I mean by that. And then 4, denial and delusion. It's a national mindset. I think that the Nigerian people, and this now is not just the leaders, this is the entire population, we are constantly in denial. And we are constantly deluding ourselves. We call ourselves the giant of Africa. Maybe we're a giant in no power and we're a giant in no water, but we're certainly not an economic giant or a masterpiece of a nation that is providing for its people. And then we talk about solutions. So one thing is to complain and to outline problems. Another thing is what are the solutions? And then the time for action is now. So this map just gives you an indication of the poverty level of Nigeria. You can see clearly that there is tremendous, the darker shades will tell you where the major poverty concentrations are. And then the whiter level tells you where there is some form of economic activity that is combating poverty, if you will. This is an old date, incidence of poverty. I wanted to show this because it has actually, gotten much worse as of this particular date. This was done in 1996. Right now, it's about 3 times the poverty level in Nigeria. Is Nigeria dying? I say it is. I say it is because I say that the leadership needs to arrest the situation right now. We are in an emergency situation. It is the only nation in the world where the inhuman trade of human trafficking, Nigeria is a supplier, Nigeria is a transit nation, Nigeria is a destination nation. Human trafficking. I'm going to outlist all the evils of our society, which have nothing to do with leadership. If you recall, we talked about leadership being the problem. Now, I want to redirect it that the people are part and parcel of that problem, the Nigerian people. And that is why we in Annabelle Leadership Academy believe that leadership is for everybody. So it's not just for people with the titles. It's not just for people in government. Leadership is for all of us because we are all part of the Nigerian problem. Nigeria has the highest number of hate crimes in Africa that result in fatalities. Even at peacetime, we have more hate crimes and more people getting killed or fatalities as a result of hate crime than some of the nations that are at war. Whereas we're at peace. Organized crime has become a thing of the order of the day. Criminal gangs have taken over our government structures, our agencies, even our private industries, resulting in lack of access for basic services for the majority of the population. So what I mean basically is that criminal gangs are folks who have hijacked the systems of some of our systems of government, some of our systems of our corporations, and they are working only for their own benefit. Now, even our religious organizations are not exempted. Criminal elements have taken over many of our religious organizations. A lot of them have completely lost focus. And I would like to be quoted that any religious leader that is flying around in a private jet, in my opinion, is not a religious leader. I'm sorry to say that. I'm sorry. There is no religious organization that should be buying private jets for his or her pastor. Nigeria, we have 200 private jets, more than any other country in the developing world. It is a shame. So what you have is that the religious organizations have joined the bandwagon. Like the student said, if you can't beat them, you join them. We have one of the poorest standards of education in Africa. We are calling ourselves the giant of Africa. The last time that they did a national survey on the results of WAEC and JAM, what was the result? What was the percentage of passing rates? 4%, 5%. The federal government actually lowered the pass rate, the cutoff mark for JAM to 160 in order to increase the number of people that passed. Again, that is a denial. We're in denial. You don't lower the cutoff rate just because you want to increase the percentage of passed. So what kind of nation are we trying to create? They're saying that the reading rates in Nigeria are so low, they cannot go any lower. People don't read anymore. Nobody is reading anything. And like Ben Bruce said earlier on today, how many of us even know the history of Nigeria? How many of us have read on our own? Jungle justice. We all remember this. The Alufo. 4 boys that were taken away from the prime of their life, torn down and burnt alive. Because some people took it upon themselves to dispense justice there and then. For crimes they did not even commit. It is not government that did it. It is not the leadership that did it. It is the Nigerian people. And if you had watched the video, you will see the faces of those in the crowd, spurring them on. Pour kerosene, put tire. Some people will go and hit them. Young boys, look at their faces. They could be anybody's brother or sister or child. And this is not the only incident. As a matter of fact, a week after this, it happened again. Unfortunately, that particular incident did not get recorded. So we didn't get to hear about it. Yes. The same thing. Poverty has become a way of life. Ritual murders in Nigeria are on an unprecedented level. Again, this is not the leadership. This is the people. Okay? I think it was His Excellency Donald Duke that talked about the man that was trying to disappear at the port of entry in London. We believe in so much nonsense. So you actually believe that if you cut off somebody's genitals and mix it up with a portion, money will come out from the pot. What utter nonsense. But where did we get this backwardness from? Or somebody believes that if you put a portion together and all of a sudden, you go to your room and you will find a box of money waiting for you. Some people actually believe this. And that's why they are getting involved in ritual murders and ritual killings. I know there was an uncle of mine that used to say that all those people who believe in what the Igbos call it ogu ego, and if they believe in it, that's their business. But he knows that the richest people in this world are not Nigerians. So he doesn't know which ogu did they concoct in order to become rich. And then you have some people, the one I like to talk about is our young women in the audience. Please forgive me. But some of you believe that you can actually go to a Dibia man, mix up some concoction, and then a man will start following you. And then the woman will, instead of doing the right thing to keep her husband, she now turns around and says, that woman used medicine and took my husband away. But the question I ask people who believe that rubbish is that why, if you know that there are certain medicines or concussions that can get you a good man, then why haven't they gone after Denzel Washington? Can you tell me? Why don't they go for the best? Let them go and get Bill Gates, and we know that the medicine is strong. Huh? Mark Zuckerberg, the CEO of Facebook, he's not married, he's a billionaire. Go and get him with medicine. Huh? We believe rubbish. We're delusions of witchcraft. Akwa Ibom has become the capital of murdering of children in the name of witches. All of a sudden, you have a strong-headed child, which everybody goes through at adolescent age, and then the parents will turn around and brand him or her a witch, and they go and throw the person into the river. The United Nations has labeled that as Nigeria is the center and Akwa Ibom is the capital. It's the truth. Then we talk about kidnapping, violent crime, armed robbery. The figures are rising through the roof. Just the weekend, the mother of the Minister of Finance was kidnapped. That is the biggest slap a nation can get. Your most prominent minister, the mother is kidnapped. So we have totally gone 180 degrees as a nation. And this is not the leadership. Of course, there are reasons for this. But I don't want to look at the reasons. I want to look at the actions first. So the kidnapping and the violent crime and the armed robbery that is going on is the Nigerian people that are doing this. Then we have stringent government controls and management of our national life and the economy, which is bringing us back to deregulation and subsidy, which I believe Ben Bruce touched on it. And I like to create this scenario, which I always tell people when the subsidy debate came up. I said, if you are a farmer and you have 5 children, you are producing cotton on your farm, okay? You have 5 children, and your main product is cotton. You don't teach your children how to weave cotton, but you sell the cotton, and you make money, and you feed your children, okay? Then 20 years later, your 5 children, each of them gets 5 children each. So you now have 25 people in your household. 27 if you include the mother and father. So the patriarch and the matriarch. So you're now 27. The size of the farm has not increased. The amount of cotton has not increased. You have not taught your children how to weave cotton. Your children, therefore, have not taught their children how to weave cotton. But you still want to sell the cotton in order to feed 25 people or 27 people. And then somebody comes to you and says, why don't we teach you how to weave? Because if you sell clothes, you might be able to make more money than selling just the cotton, because your farm is not going to increase. And in fact, the yield that you get from that farm size will continue to diminish, because the law of diminishing returns states that when you apply more effort and more labor, you will get to a certain level, you cannot go any further. But you say no. You are not interested in weaving any clothes. You want to sell the cotton. And you also want to sell the cotton, and you want to use that money to now buy food and buy clothes for this entire family of 27. And then a few years later, those little children also have children. So now you're talking about 100 people. The population is increasing. You get the picture. Population is increasing, but you have refused to apply any value added to the cotton. And then you turn around and say you want to be buying the clothes that are bought from the cotton that you have sold at a certain price forever and ever. It is not sustainable. We are living in a delusion and a fool's paradise. And sooner or later, it's going to collapse on all of our heads. It is not about President Goodluck's administration. It is not about those folks who are advocating for subsidy removal. No, these are just facts. If we do not attack that problem now, it is going to collapse sooner or later. Then we talk about the crisis in power and energy. we have the poorest power per capita amongst all the OPEC nations. And we understand that the lack of power removes about $135 billion from our GDP. And then Nigeria has now become the capital of piracy in the western coast of Africa. I don't want to talk about adulterated foods and drinks and drugs, road safety, or over-bloated government structure. I mentioned that already. But let's look at the economic structure and a wake-up call. This is a wake-up call. According to the National Bureau of Statistics, our GDP is made up of about 43% agriculture, wholesale and retail 18%, real estate 1.6%, telecoms 5%, and so on. But it is all, our foreign exchange and our foreign reserves are dependent on oil. But our oil reserves are in decline. I'll say it again. Our oil reserves are in decline. Presently, we have 36.5 billion barrels of oil in reserve, down from 37 billion a year ago. This is the first year that Nigeria has actually recorded a decline in reserves. The DPR just made it official 2 weeks ago. The DPR is the Department of Petroleum Resources. So our reserves are in decline. So that oil that we're all depending on is in decline. Oil production peaked in Nigeria in 2005 with 2.6 million barrels a day. Nigeria's share of total world market of oil is also in decline. As a matter of fact, our biggest customer, which is the United States, crude oil sale of what all the crude that the United States buys, Nigeria used to supply them 11% as of 2010. But as of 2012, which is this year, we sold less than 5% of total US demand of crude. So again, our customers are beginning to shy away. So our reserves are in decline and our customers are also in decline. And then exploration. Exploration in Nigeria, exploration of oil is at its lowest ebb in 40 years in the history of the oil and gas industry. The total industry drilled, only 3 wells were drilled in 2011, down from 20 wells which were drilled in 2005, which means exploration is not taking place. So again, we're all depending on an industry that is in decline. And then this theft of the oil is increasing. According to Shell, 180,000 barrels of oil are stolen every day in Nigeria. Talk about leaking Nigeria. This is a very important slide. And I'm going to take a little extra time because I think these are some very important issues which come together for the summit that we're organizing. Nigeria is the most polluted nation of all OPEC countries in the world. We had about 2,400 oil spills recorded between 2006 and 2010 alone, which means we have totally devastated the Niger Delta region and nobody is raising an eyebrow. Whereas if you remember the oil spill of British Petroleum, which happened in the US 2-3 years ago, the whole world heard about it. We have had 2,400 of similar spills and we are not even raising an eyelid. We are the giant of Africa. Education. What are the Nigerian people doing about education? A couple of people talked about the children, especially mentioned about not killing their dream and what is happening with education in Nigeria. Nigerians, some of you, and some of your friends are spending $10 to $12 billion in educating their children abroad every year. Ghana alone, we are now spending $1 billion a year to send children to Ghana to school. The UK gets about $4 billion a year and the US about $5 billion every year. Then by the time you add Japan, Singapore, and some of these, Cyprus, I hear Cyprus is now a new destination, you're talking about a total of $12 billion. And we are complaining about poor facilities of education in Nigeria. All the money is going abroad. We are creating jobs abroad. And it's not just education. We spend $2 to $3 billion a year in importing rice. $2 to $3 billion. We're a rice-eating nation. That's the truth. And rice is not even a very healthy meal. And the rice that we're importing is extremely unhealthy. In fact, the Nigerian rice is much more healthy. We spend $3 to $4 billion in importing wheat, white wheat, not brown wheat. We spend $700 million a year in importing sugar. And then generators. We're spending $12 billion every year on generators. Another $13 billion a year in maintaining generators. And then we're spending $24 to $25 billion in importing fuel. Then telecommunications, about $6 to $7 billion is going out. So you can see why I call it leaking Nigeria. All our money is going abroad. Everything. That is why we're having problems. Because nothing is staying back for Nigeria. We're a consumer nation. And this, again, has nothing to do with leadership. Because this is everybody is at fault here. Everybody is at fault. The argument can go either way. Of course, the leadership has a role to play. The leadership has a role to play. But we also have a role to play. The more we grumble, you make my case. We are in denial. You don't even want to accept the reality. We are in denial as a nation. And you have just proved my point. Because you're not even willing to accept the fact that this is a Nigerian problem. It's a Nigerian problem. It is not the leadership alone that sends their children to Ghana. Everybody does that. Once you can afford it. I understand that the Cyprus embassy in Abuja is now a beehive of activity. And it's not about rich people's children. It's everybody. We say we're making progress, but the facts show otherwise. We say we're growing, but the facts show otherwise. We are the giant of Africa, but the facts show otherwise. We have cultural, in my opinion, religious and traditional chains that hold us back. I like to bring it to speed, in perspective again. Look at a country like Pakistan and a country like India. They are the same people. Some of the tribes are the same. Pakistan was carved out of India in the 40s. However, there are two types of mindsets that you have in Pakistan and a different one in India. A young man wakes up in India and he sees a man who has built a big house. And he says, wow, I'm going to work very hard. I'm going to burn the midnight oil because when I grow up, I want to be like that man who has this big new house. Whereas in Pakistan, the young man wakes up, he sees the big house, and he says, I'm going to go and look for guns because I want to kill that man for being rich. The mindsets are different. One is productive, the other one is regressive. And that is the challenge of culture. That is the challenge of culture. There are areas of culture that will hold you back as a nation or for development. We must look at that. Why is it that Singapore, Dubai, Hong Kong, China, Brazil, Korea are different? What makes them different from us? This one I call delusion and denial. Because everybody keeps saying there is no money. Right? So, yes, I agree with you. There are some problems with the leadership. Like I said, there are leadership problems, there are followership problems. But this one is clearly a leadership problem. This slide. Where is our money? The Nigerian government has over 32 intervention funds that are expected to intervene in the economy and in your lives that are not doing their jobs. And I have listed them for you. There may be more. Petroleum Technology Development Fund, Nigerian Trust Fund, Agricultural Development Fund, Infrastructure Development Fund, Microcredit Development Fund, Export Development Fund, Textile Fund, Small and Medium Industries Fund, Education Tax Fund, Export Expansion Grant Fund, Police Fund, Nigerian European Development Fund, Nigerian Economic Recovery Fund, Nigerian Automotive Development Fund, Nigerian Ship Acquisition Fund, Petroleum Equalization Fund, CBN SME Guarantee Fund, the Nigerian Power Fund, Nigeria Industrial Training Fund, Universal Provision Trust Fund, Niger Delta Development Fund, Ecology Fund, Bank of Industry Fund, Nigerian Export-Import Bank, Urban Development Bank Fund, Federal Mortgage Bank Fund, National Housing Fund, National Pension Fund, National Skills Acquisition Fund, Federal Road Maintenance Fund, National Lottery Fund, Tourism Fund, Nexim Bank Entertainment Fund, Bank of Industry Agriculture Fund. Totally, these funds represent $30 to $40 billion a year of your money. I did the research myself. $30 to $40 billion a year. All these funds. And these funds, they take their money directly from the economy. 2% of this, 3% of that, 1% of this. And the money comes up to $30 billion. All gone. Because we don't see the impact. Now, what I have listed here is solutions that can save us. Where are the capital sources? People talk about there's no money. I want to show you where the money is. The federal budget, where everybody's eyes are on the budget, the federal budget only represents $31.5 billion. So the intervention fund, you're looking at an extra $30 to $40 billion. If we plug those leaks I talked about, the money we're spending in education, medical treatment abroad, I didn't even mention medical treatment. We spend about $500 million a month in sending people to India for medical treatment. Then if we mobilize local investment, $10 to $15 billion, the pension fund today is about $15 billion, and then the stolen funds, which all reports tell us that we have about $400 billion abroad. Can't you see clearly that this will change the entire scale of the Nigerian nation if we are able to mobilize all this? So I believe, and this is my suggestion, and you can decide between today and tomorrow, we have a communique. I believe that we should give all the looters, past government functionaries, corrupt contractors, past and present civil servants, a 6 months amnesty period to bring back all their money. 6 months, no questions asked, no EFCC, no police, no nothing. Just bring back the money. Let's invest it in Nigeria. Give them 6 months, and government should have just a 20% tax on that money. So when you bring it back, government takes 20%, you have everything else. But it must be invested in key industries in Nigeria. Would you agree with that strategy? There will be arguments on both sides. But in my opinion, the money is going to stay abroad anyway. We have already lost it. If you give people an incentive to bring it back, they will. And that money can be put to use for Nigeria. So it is a suggestion. If you agree, we will put it in a communique and we will present it to the government. We need to give the looters an amnesty period. 6 months amnesty, no questions asked. Bring back your money to work for Nigeria. We can change the landscape of Nigeria if we mobilize this money. This is the map of the world, and you can see the light areas are where there is lack of economic activity, darker areas are economic activity. I just wanted to give you a global perspective, but I'm almost done. I gave you the analogy of India and Pakistan, the Korean Wars. This is just to buttress the difference in culture. Thank you. The difference in culture. Korea was one nation. In the 1950s, there was the Korean War. The nations divided. One nation took a certain system, a certain culture, a certain ideology. Another nation took a totally different one. One was capitalist-based, the other one was regimented. Look at the results 50 years down the road. North Korea has a GDP of 1,700 per capita, $40 billion GDP. Even Nigeria is about 4-5 times that of North Korea in terms of GDP. And then look at South Korea. The same people, the same nation, $1.3 trillion. Top 10 nation in the world, $27,000 per capita income. One people, the same culture, different style of government, different style of economy. The difference is clear. It is ideology that makes the difference. It is intellectualism that makes the difference. Korea is a clear example. Because somebody will tell you, oh, these people are different from us, so we can't do it this way, or this way, Nigeria is different. These people are the same. North and South Korea, they started off at the same level after the war in 1955. And this is the result. Of course, Korea has dominated in many products, but one of the major success stories is the way they were able to take over the television industry. They looked at the US market as a strategic response, went after the businesses, and now they dominate that market in terms of flat televisions. Action time. It is a time to focus on Nigeria. For our leadership, they need help. They need help. I don't want to throw away the baby with the bathwater. So what we need to do is to give them ideas. For Nigeria, let's look at the real economy. What are the areas that can present a competitive advantage? Let's outline key industries. Software, banking, healthcare, telecoms, education. Let's choose 2 or 3. And then we can ensure that the investment that we are trying to mobilize goes in there. While Nigerians are spending $6 billion a year in medical services in India, Nigerians are changing the world. Dr. Ernest Madu is an Igbo man that lives in the Caribbean, in Jamaica. He has the most sophisticated heart health clinic in the Caribbean nation. All the presidents and prime ministers of the Caribbean use his clinic in Nigeria. Ernest Madu, go and Google him. It is the most sophisticated hospital in the Caribbean today. And all the presidents in that region go to him. He's a Nigerian, but he has given his expertise to other parts of the world because we are unwilling to support initiative. So again, I try to give you an idea into what we could do with the healthcare industry. And of course, we all know the success story of the Nigerian film industry. And just to round up, I like to look at missed opportunities, which again becomes a function of leadership. Nigerian Breweries used to be one of the best managed companies in Nigeria. It used to be the Ford of Nigeria. Excellent management team, technological advances, capital market access. But as with all things Nigeria, we always lose it. So somewhere in 2003, 2004, it was bought over by Heineken. So now the entire wealth created by Nigerian Breweries is now benefiting the Dutch people because all the money goes to Dutchland. Because we sold out. So in conclusion, there is a coming world war for jobs. And this is where I say leadership is most important. Total world GDP is $60 trillion, of which the United States has about 15 trillion, 25%, China 6 trillion, or 10%. In 30 years, total world GDP is projected to reach $200 trillion. Which means that $140 trillion of new jobs, new customers, new businesses, new technology will be created. The next 30 years will be defined by a new world war for jobs and innovation. Access to capital and the process, new economic empires will be born. New states will fail, new failures will be recorded, and new nations will grow. The question is, where will Nigeria be? Are we going to wallow in poverty, disease, and malnutrition because we have not chosen the right leaders, the most innovative leaders to lead us into this era? Or are we going to be one of those nations up there, providing for our people and exporting to nations around the world? The ability of our leaders to create and innovate to position their nations for the creation of good jobs for their citizens will define everything in the next few years. So whether we like it or not, it's going to happen. The world is going to be defined by those nations that can create opportunities for their people. The new demands for global leadership requires leaders to master the art of job creation. Traditional leadership, which was defined by military power, politics, religion, and personal values, will not work anymore. And if you continue to wallow in that delusion, we will be left behind as a nation. What you need now is creativity and innovation. One of my greatest mentors is Mr. Al Gore, the former Vice President of the United States. Super mentor, and I'll tell you why. And I'm going to close on this note. A lot of people don't know this story. I'm going to share it with you. The most valuable American citizen in the last 30 years is Mr. Al Gore. The most valuable. I didn't say the most influential. I didn't say the richest. I said the most valuable. He is presently responsible for over $100 trillion in additional GDP, the growth of mega companies and millions of jobs that were created in the last 30 years. Why? Mr. Venton Crift was working for the NAFRA, which is the Defense Department Labs, in 1972. He has been working in that department, the US military. They set up a system where the US military bases around the world could communicate with each other by transferring data from one military base to the other in an effort to ensure that if America was attacked, their data would not be compromised. This was developed in 1972, this system. The military liked the system, and it served their purpose because it transferred data quickly. And in times of war, it protected the US against disaster. Fast forward from 1972 to 1986, nothing happened. The US were using this system from 1972 to 1986. By 1986, Senator Al Gore at that time visited the lab, and he spent some time with Vinton. And when Vinton explained what they were doing, he asked Vinton, why don't we share this system with the rest of the United States and with our innovative population? Vinton said it was of no use, there's no point, people won't get it. He said, let him try. That innovators might be able to expand on it. This thing that you people have done for the military is great. You have been using it for about 15 years. Let me try. So you know what Al Gore did? Al Gore went and drafted and eventually saw to the passing of a bill called the High Performance Computing and Communications Act. It was eventually passed in 1991. It's otherwise called the Gore Bill, G-O-R-E, the Gore Bill. It is that bill that gave to the rise of the internet that we are enjoying today. That is the genesis of the internet and the World Wide Web. It was defined by the Gore Bill, which is the High Performance Computing and Communications Act of 1991. After that bill, the bill was thrown open and entrepreneurs and innovators moved in. You have Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, Andy Grove, Michael Dell, Steve Ballmer, all of them came out as a result of a single piece of legislation by a super mentor and an innovator. He changed the face of his nation and he changed the face of the world. And that can be possible in Nigeria. If you are not part of the solution, you're part of the problem. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, a resounding round of applause for Nicholas Okoye. My goodness. Indeed, if you're not part of the solution, then you're part of the problem.